Have you ever tried to explain something you know inside and out, something that feels so simple to you, only to get a completely blank stare in return? You're sitting there thinking you're being crystal clear, but the message just isn't landing. Well, today we're going to talk about exactly why that happens. It's a powerful cognitive bias called the curse of knowledge, and it's what turns even the smartest experts into pretty terrible communicators.
To really feel this bias in action, let's just play a quick game. Okay, so the setup is super simple. Imagine you're the tapper. You pick a song that literally everyone knows, something like Happy Birthday, and you just tap out the rhythm on a table. Someone else, they're the listener, and their job is to guess the song. Now here's the key. As you're tapping, you can hear the whole song in your head, right? The melody, the words, the whole shebang. To you, it is perfectly obvious. So before the listener even guesses, you have to predict how often they'll get it right. Given how clear that song feels in your head, what are the odds? Well, in the original 1990 Stanford study this whole thing is based on, the tappers predicted a 50% success rate. 50%. 1 out of every 2 tries. Does that sound about right to you? The actual results? A mind-blowing 2.5%. Yeah, you heard that right. Out of 120 songs that were tapped out, the listeners only guessed 3 of them correctly. 3! That enormous gap between the 50% the tapper expected and the 2.5% that actually happened, that is the curse of knowledge in action. The tapper is just baffled, thinking, how could you not get that? It was so obvious. But to the listener, it's just a bunch of random disconnected taps.
So that feeling, that huge invisible wall between what we know and what we manage to get across, it actually has a name. Let's diagnose the real culprit behind this massive communication breakdown. It's called the curse of knowledge. And at its core, the bias is this. Once we know something, it becomes almost impossible for us to remember what it felt like to not know it. Our knowledge literally curses us. We can no longer put ourselves in the shoes of someone who's hearing this for the very first time. This bias creates a communication trap that has this fantastic acronym, COIK. It stands for Clear Only If Known. Think about it. Our instructions, our emails, our presentations, they often make perfect sense, but only to people who already have the same knowledge we do. It's like we're accidentally speaking in a secret code that only a few people can understand. And we see COIC every single day, mostly in the form of jargon. If you're a videographer, you say B-roll, and it's a simple, everyday thing. For a designer, kerning is just basic vocabulary. If you're a web developer, you talk about APIs without even thinking about it. But to anyone on the outside, those words are just meaningless noise. They're roadblocks to understanding. This quote from Chris Donnelly just sums it up perfectly. Jargon is magic within groups and poison between them. And it's so true. It's an amazing shorthand when you're talking to people who get it. It builds that sense of community. But the second you step outside that circle, it's just poison. It completely shuts down clear communication. Now, this isn't just some quirky little psychological thing to know about. The curse of knowledge has serious, real-world impacts in business, in education, pretty much everywhere. Let's see it in action. Okay, here is a classic and frankly hilarious example of this. A science teacher wants to show the dangers of alcohol. So she shows the class a worm in a glass of water, swimming around happily. Then she drops it in a glass of alcohol, and it dies. The teacher, cursed with her knowledge of biology, thinks the lesson is obvious, but one student, lacking that context, writes down the takeaway, if you drink alcohol, you'll never get worms. The message received was the exact opposite of the one intended. The curse of knowledge also gives us all this abstract, fuzzy language, especially from leaders. Contrast a vague goal like maximize shareholder value with what John F. Kennedy said back in 1961. He didn't say, let's become leaders in aerospace innovation. No way. He said, we are going to put a man on the moon and return him safely by the end of the decade. See the difference? One is corporate jargon that means nothing to most people. The other is a concrete, powerful story that an entire country could get behind. And here's where it gets really crazy. This bias creates a massive blind spot. Look at these numbers. A survey found that 86% of leaders believe they are great communicators. 86%. But when their employees were asked, only 17% agreed. That enormous gap, wow, that's the curse of knowledge at work. The leaders hear the beautiful melody of their strategic vision in their heads, but the team, they just hear a bunch of random taps. Okay, so we've seen the problem. We've felt its impact. But the good news is we can fight back. This isn't some permanent condition. It's a bad habit, and we can break it. So let's build a toolkit for breaking the curse.
We're going to focus on 4 main strategies. First, we've got to use simple, clear language. Second, we need to ground our ideas in concrete examples and stories. Third, and this is a big one, get an outside perspective. And finally, structure your message so it's easy to follow. These are basically the 4 pillars of curse-free communication. Let's start with simple language, because this is the most direct fix. You have to actively hunt down and kill the jargon and acronyms in your own communication. Here's a great little trick. Do a jargon audit on your next email or presentation. Circle every single term that a smart person from a totally different field wouldn't get instantly. And look, if you absolutely have to use a technical term, just define it. Right away, never ever assume your audience knows what you're talking about.
Okay, next up, make your ideas concrete. Our brains are just not wired for abstract concepts. We're wired for specifics. So use analogies. Build a bridge from a concept your audience already gets to the new one you're trying to teach them. And tell stories. Stories are amazing because they tap into our emotions and our senses. They create these little mental movies that just bypass the curse altogether. And maybe most important of all, get feedback. Find someone who is not an expert in your field and have them read your stuff. They will be your #1 guide to finding your own blind spots. Think of them as your official curse detectors.
All right, so we've defined the problem, we've seen the damage it can do, and we've built a toolkit to fight back. Now for the last and most important step, which is turning this lens back on ourselves and spotting our own blind spots.
And this is the crucial takeaway here. Beating the curse of knowledge is not about dumbing down your ideas. It's the exact opposite. It's about being a more sophisticated, more thoughtful, more empathetic communicator. It's about mastering the incredibly valuable skill of perspective taking, of actually seeing the world and your own ideas through someone else's eyes. It's basically a communication superpower.
So I'll leave you with this one question to chew on. In your next meeting, or your next email, or even the next time you try to explain what you do for a living to a family member, where is the curse of knowledge hiding? Because just spotting it is the first giant step to breaking its spell and becoming the kind of communicator everyone wants to listen to.